Working the late shift at the small town hospital was something I had grown accustomed to. The quiet corridors, the rhythmic beeping of machines, and the occasional rustle of paper were the usual soundtrack to my nights. As a nurse, I found solace in the routine, knowing that the patients were resting and everything was under control. But that night was different, and it would be a night I would never forget. It started like any other shift. I was making my rounds, checking on patients and ensuring that everything was in order. The hospital was unusually quiet, with only a few patients in the ward. The clock ticked past midnight, and I was about to settle down for a quick break when suddenly the lights flickered and went out, plunging the entire hospital into darkness. My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly composed myself. Power outages were rare but not unheard of, and I knew I had to figure out what was going on. I grabbed my flashlight and started down the hallway, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. As I made my way towards the electrical room, I stumbled upon Sammy, one of our patients, standing in the hallway with a flashlight of her own. Her eyes were wide with fear, and she looked relieved to see me. "What are you doing out here, Sammy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "I got scared when the lights went out," she replied, her voice trembling. "Nurse Lily told me to find you if anything happened." I froze for a moment, confusion washing over me. "Wait, what do you mean? Who's Nurse Lily?" Sammy looked at me, puzzled. "Nurse Lily, I thought you were her." A chill ran down my spine. "Sammy, there's no other nurse here tonight besides me, and there hasn't been a nurse named Lily working here for over 10 years. I explained that Lily had worked here until she tragically passed away from natural causes. My initial annoyance at what I thought was a prank faded as I saw the genuine fear and confusion in Sammy's eyes. She insisted that she had spoken with a nurse named Lily just 10 minutes ago. "Let's talk about this later," I suggested, trying to reassure her. "For now, let's get you back to your room, and I'll figure out the lights." But Sammy was adamant about staying with me, especially after learning that there shouldn't be anyone else in the hospital. Reluctantly, I agreed to let her accompany me. As we walked down the dimly lit corridor, the atmosphere felt heavy, as if we were being watched. We exchanged nervous glances, and just as we were about to speak, we both sensed something behind us. We turned simultaneously, and there it was, a tall, shadowy figure standing at the end of the hallway. We screamed and ran in the opposite direction, adrenaline propelling us back to Sammy's room. We locked the door behind us, our hearts pounding in our chests. I grabbed the phone and called the police, my hands shaking as I explained the situation. The sound of sirens approaching was a relief, but just as they arrived, the lights flickered back on. Sammy and I exchanged bewildered looks, wondering if the police had somehow restored the power. When the officers found us, I asked, "How did you get the lights back on?" One of them looked at me, confused. "What do you mean? They were on when we got here." I insisted that the lights had been off until their arrival, and I decided to check the surveillance cameras for any clues. But when we reviewed the footage, everything from an hour before the outage until the police arrived was missing. The police took our statements, and Sammy, understandably shaken, requested a transfer to another hospital. I ended my shift 2 hours later, exhausted and unnerved. I explained everything to my manager and requested not to work the late-night shift again. In the days that followed, I tried to gather more information about Lily, hoping to find some explanation. But the more I searched, the more elusive the truth became. I was left to wonder if it was Lily's spirit reaching out, or if someone had broken in and played an elaborate prank. The mystery remained unsolved, a haunting reminder of that eerie night. The building loomed before us, a shadowy monolith against the night sky. Its windows were like dark, empty eyes, staring out into the void. I felt a chill run down my spine as Levi and I stepped out of the patrol car, the only sound the crunch of gravel beneath our boots. The neighborhood had been plagued by rumors about this place for years, whispers of ghostly apparitions and strange noises echoing through the halls. But tonight, the screams were real. and they had drawn us here. Levi, my senior partner, was calm and collected as always. "I'll head in first," he said, adjusting his flashlight. "You stay by the entrance and keep your ears open. If you hear anything, let me know over the walkie-talkie." I nodded, trying to suppress the unease bubbling in my stomach. "Got it!" As Levi disappeared into the darkness of the building, I stood by the entrance, straining to hear any sound over the pounding of my heart. The minutes stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity. My mind began to wander, imagining all sorts of horrors lurking within those walls. Suddenly, a gunshot shattered the silence, ripping through the night like a jagged bolt of lightning. My blood ran cold, and without thinking, I sprinted up the stairs, my heart hammering in my chest. I found Levi on the second floor, slumped against the wall, blood seeping through his uniform. "Levi!" I gasped, dropping to my knees beside him. He grimaced, clutching his side. A woman, red hair, she came at me with a sword, looked like she was on something. "Hang in there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm getting you out of here." Despite his protests, I managed to half carry, half drag him down the stairs and out to the car. As I was about to radio for backup, Levi's eyes widened in terror. "There she is," he shouted, pointing a trembling finger. I spun around, my hand instinctively reaching for my gun. "Freeze," I commanded, but instead of complying, she lunged toward me. In that split second, training took over. I fired. The woman crumpled to the ground, lifeless. As I approached, my heart sank. Her hair was dark, not red as Levi had described. Confusion and dread gnawed at me as the ambulance and backup arrived. Levi, pale and in pain, looked at me from the stretcher. "I swear, she had red hair," he insisted, reaching in his pocket and producing a handful of crimson strands. I grabbed this from her head. We exchanged a weak, incredulous laugh, the absurdity of it all mingling with the grim reality. As Levi was whisked away to the hospital, I joined the other officers in searching the building. Room after room came back clear, the eerie silence settling once more. "Has anyone checked the roof?" I asked, a sense of foreboding creeping over me. 2 colleagues volunteered to join me, and together we ascended to the top. As I pushed open the door to the roof, my breath caught in my throat. There, standing at the edge, was a woman with fiery red hair, wearing the same dress as the one I had shot. "Hands where I can see them," I called out, but she remained still, gazing out over the city. "Do you need help?" I ventured, taking a cautious step forward. She turned slowly, and my heart stopped. Her face was identical to the woman I had shot. "You killed her," she screamed, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "You killed her!" Before I could react, she leaped from the edge, her scream echoing into the night. The aftermath was a blur of flashing lights and somber faces. We learned later that the women were sisters, both suffering from severe mental illness. Their tragic end weighed heavily on my conscience, a reminder of the thin line we walk as officers between life and death. Levi made a full recovery, but the events of that night left a mark on both of us. The building was eventually torn down, but its shadow lingers in my memory, a testament to the horrors we faced within its walls. I carry the lessons of that night with me, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of compassion in our duty to protect and serve. Working the late shift at Chipotle had become a routine for me. The summer nights were warm, and the air was thick with the scent of grilled meat and spices. That particular night, I was the last one in the restaurant, finishing up the final chores. My manager and 2 coworkers had already left, leaving me with the simple task of taking out the trash and locking up. After locking the door behind me, I grabbed the 2 hefty trash bags. The strip mall where Chipotle was located had a peculiar design, forcing me to trek about 4 minutes to reach the dumpster. Normally, we used a cart to make the trip easier, but I was eager to get home and decided to forgo it. As I walked, the night enveloped me in a blanket of solitude. The distant hum of traffic was the only sound accompanying my footsteps. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow over the empty parking lot. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, but I chalked it up to my imagination. When I finally reached the dumpster, I tossed the first bag in. The loud thud echoed in the stillness, but it was immediately followed by a blood-curdling scream. I jumped back, my heart pounding in my chest. My eyes darted around, searching for the source of the scream, but the silence that followed was deafening. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. No response, just the whisper of the wind through the nearby trees. Shaking off the unsettling feeling, I picked up the second bag and hurled it into the dumpster. That's when I saw him, a filthy, disheveled man crouched behind the dumpster. His clothes were tattered, and his eyes were wild with a mix of fear and aggression. I instinctively backed away, but as soon as he realized I'd seen him, he charged at me. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run. He grabbed my sweater, yanking me back with surprising strength. Desperation took over, and I swung my arms wildly, trying to break free. In the struggle, I noticed he had a sharp piece of metal, and before I knew it, I felt a searing pain in my arm. He had managed to cut me, but adrenaline fueled my fight. Eventually, he let go, and I watched as he started to run. I wasn't about to let him get away. Fueled by a mix of anger and fear, I chased after him, my phone in hand. "Siri, call 911, I shouted, my voice echoing in the night. The man stumbled as he entered the woods behind the mall. I caught up to him, grabbing hold of his arm as the dispatcher came on the line. 911, what's your emergency?" the operator asked. I tried to explain the situation, but the man thrashed wildly, yelling incoherently. In the chaos, he bit my arm, and I instinctively let go. He disappeared into the darkness of the woods, leaving me breathless and frustrated. I relayed my location to the dispatcher, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. The realization that I had let him escape gnawed at me, but there was nothing more I could do. When the police arrived, they took my statement and escorted me to the hospital. My arm was bandaged, and I was left with a lingering sense of unease. I quit my job shortly after, receiving a settlement for the ordeal, but no amount of money could erase the frustration and fear that night had instilled in me. The memory of that encounter haunted me, a chilling reminder of how quickly a mundane task could turn into a nightmare. I often wondered who that man was and what had driven him to such desperation, but those questions remained unanswered, lingering in the shadows of my mind.